My then fiance, now my wife, Paige Parker, and I spent 3 years driving around the world. We went through 116 countries. We were 3 years on the road, and we went 245,000 kilometers. As you can see, I got into the Guinness Book of Records because I'm the first hedge fund manager to drive around the world. So in my case, it was pretty easy to get into the Guinness Book of Records. Go around the world again, only this time I'm going to tell you some of the things that are affecting me as an investor, as a citizen, as a parent, whatever I'm doing, and then I'll take questions. We'll talk about whatever you all want to afterwards. The first thing you must understand, we all must understand, concerns the rise of China. Yes, it's starting to get a play in the press these days, but most people don't really understand what's happening in China, including many people in China don't understand. China is the next great country in the world, whether we like it or not. The 19th century was the century of the UK. The 20th century was the century of the US. The 21st century is going to be the century of China. I know they call themselves communist in China. Yes, they do call themselves communists, but they are among the best capitalists in the world right now. I know people who will tell you that they are the best capitalists in the world as we speak. In China, they save and invest over 35% of their income. In the U.S., by the way, we save and invest 1% of our income. In China, when they come to work, they don't say, how many days holiday do I get? They say, how many days can I come to work? Because they know how we live in the West, and they want to live the same way. They're willing to work as hard as is necessary, and they're willing to save and invest as much as is necessary. If you look at Chinese history, you will see there have been some spectacular periods in Chinese history. You'll also see some big failures, of course. Well, they're on the rise again. In 1978, Deng Xiaoping unleashed entrepreneurship and capitalism again, and it has taken hold. You must understand what's happening in China. There will certainly be setbacks along the way. I promise you, just as there were many setbacks in the U.S., as we rose to power and glory, as the UK rose to power and glory, you certainly had plenty of setbacks. But you've got to be attentive to what's happening there. If you see problems in China, and by the way, I expect to see more real estate speculators going broke in China in the next few months, but if whatever happens, if and when you see, not if, when you see setbacks in China, understand that it's a temporary setback and perhaps the most important thing happening in the 21st century. Pick up your phone and buy more China or figure out ways to participate. The single best word of advice I can give you, the single best advice I can give you of any kind, is to teach your children and grandchildren Chinese. It's going to be the most important language in their lifetime. If you can teach your children Chinese, you have given them a skill that most other people will not have. Another thing you all must understand, because it too is going to change the world, concerns the U.S. dollar. The U.S. dollar is and has been the world's reserve currency for 60-odd years now. That's in the process of changing. As recently as 1987, we in the U.S. were a creditor nation on the world stage. Now, as I speak to you, 19 years later, we in the U.S. owe the rest of the world over 12 trillion U.S. dollars. That's trillion with a T. It's a pretty horrible number. But the worst number is that our foreign debts in the U.S. are increasing at the rate of 1 trillion U.S. dollars every 15 months. Do the arithmetic. It's extremely simple arithmetic about where this is going. But it's also terrifying arithmetic, especially to me as an American citizen. But it's going to change much in the world. Many things in the world are going to change. Some of you will remember or have read about when the pound sterling lost its status as the world's reserve currency. It had ramifications for years throughout the UK, throughout Europe, throughout the world. Many people had to adapt and adjust. Many industries had to. Many countries had to. Well, the same thing is about to happen, is in the process of happening now with the U.S. dollar. Many of America's enemies are trying to figure out ways to exploit this situation, but even America's friends are starting to say, wait a minute, maybe these guys are out of control. Maybe something's wrong. I will tell you, we are out of control. This is a serious thing. You would think that in Washington somebody would care about it. You would think that in Washington they would be worried. In Washington, it is the official policy of the new new head of the central bank to debase the currency. He is on official record saying if he has to get into a helicopter and fly around the world and drop out dollar bills, he will do so. Now, this is a terrible, terrible policy. Many countries have tried it in history, many countries, but no one was ever successful in the long term trying this policy. No one was ever successful in the medium term trying this policy. Some have succeeded in the short term, but many didn't. But you know, it doesn't matter what I think, it doesn't matter what you think, because as that same head of the central bank said in another official statement, you've got to understand that we control the printing presses. And we will run those printing presses as fast as we have to. And he will. This man, if you look at his whole intellectual history, he has been studying printing money for decades. He's been dying for the opportunity to print money. And now they put him in charge of the printing press. Take him at his word, because he's going to do it. And to the extent that the President of the United States understands the currency, he too would like for the currency to go down. You've got to learn to protect yourself, your families, your friends, your clients, your companies, whatever, because this is a real thing and it's going to have enormous ramifications. I showed you a picture of my baby girl. My baby girl is an American citizen. My baby girl has a bank account, but my baby girl does not have an American bank account. My baby girl has a Swiss bank account. Another thing we can discuss today before we start taking questions concerns the financial markets, or maybe more directly the financial markets. The first two things we discussed are the financial markets. You know, in the 1980s and 90s, we had a huge bull market in bonds. Between 1981 and 2003, bonds essentially went up all the time. Well, in my view, that bull market is finished. Bonds made their peak in 2003. And after a 22-year bull market, bonds in 2003 have started making a big top and will be going down for years to come. Even if I'm wrong about bonds, you're not going to make any money at bonds at 4% or 2% in Japan or 5%, whatever you're earning on your bonds, on your long-term bonds. So I would urge you to stay away from bonds unless they're very short-term bonds or unless they're special situation bonds. Stocks in the 80s and 90s had a huge bull market. Many of you were part of it. Many of you remember it. But in my view, that bull market too has come to an end. If you look at stocks in the West anyway, stocks on any traditional historic valuation method are expensive. Stocks in the West, if you look at dividend yields, price to earnings ratios, book value, look at all the classic valuation methods which people have used for decades. And you will find that stocks in the West are expensive. Now, these are not any good for short-term trading or short-term investing or even medium-term investing. But over many periods, over many years, the secular basis has pretty much been when stocks are this expensive in the West, you sell them. When they get down another many percentage points, then you buy them. So stocks at best in the West, in my view, are now in a big trading range. If you can buy them down here and sell them up here 2 or 3 years later, Vince is good at that. I'm not. But if you're good at that, you can perhaps make a lot of money. We had periods like this in the past. In the 1970s, there was a period like this. A lot of people made a lot of money in those days. But most people essentially need a bull market, a rising market, a secular bull market, where stocks or things basically go up all the time. We have a market like that now. It is in raw materials, natural resources, commodities, call them whatever you want to. But we do have a new bull market in another asset class. When I try to explain this to most people, you know, most people still can't spell commodities. Most people don't have a clue about commodities. Most people think you get your coffee at Starbucks. They don't know you can buy and sell coffee and make a fortune at it. But you can. When I tell people let's make a lot of money in commodities, they get perplexed. But I would like to remind you all